Hi, this is Rich again with your 2-minute drill. And today I'd like to talk about the topic of what's the worst thing that could happen. Now I know if you're like me, you've been told a lot like don't be negative, don't focus on the negative stuff, don't attract all that, create negative karma, have positive thoughts, do positive affirmations, think positively. Well, all that is good as far as it goes. But it's actually not enough if you're running a business. And I think it's especially not enough if you're running a consulting business in this economy, which is the most challenging thing we've seen in decades and decades. Well, you need a plan. We would argue a strategic plan, but at least you're going to need a short-term plan and an intermediate plan, a near-term plan. And if you're like us, when you do your planning, your plans have all kinds of great stuff in it. They're optimistic. They have exciting new ideas in them. The opportunity to tackle new markets, to try new products. So if you're like us, your plans can be very exciting, have lots of upside. Well, I'd like to share with you something I was taught by one of my CEOs, and it kind of goes against this thing of don't ever think negative, but before we were allowed to leave a new planning process and a set of outcomes, my CEO would tell me, what's the worst thing that could happen? And we would, of course, we were not thinking in that direction, so we'd think about it. We'd say, well, this. And he'd say, give me a plan for what we'll do if that happens. And I learned it wasn't negative thinking. It was just good planning. He called it doomsday planning, which was really scary. But it was just good, thorough planning. As if all the things that we want to have happen don't happen. If they go wrong, what will we do? And that's what I'd like you to think about doing for your business. It won't be the fun part of your planning, but it's an important part. What's the worst thing that could happen? And if it happens, what would we do? Let me tell you a story. My wife is from West Virginia, and this was in the middle 80s. I was working for Xerox. They were going through a tough time, and layoffs were rumored. And my wife came to me very worried about, what will we do if we're laid off? And I said, well, number one, I don't think I'm going to get laid off. Number two, if we do get laid off, this is the Xerox severance plan. This is how much money we would have. And then we have money behind that. So we would, reduce our expenses and we'd look for a new job, but we'd live off the severance and then we'd live off our money. And then I said to her, but what if we ran out of most of that money and there was nothing on the horizon? What would we do? And she goes, I don't know. What would we do? With a panic in her face. And I said, we'd move back to West Virginia where you own 30 acres. We'd live simply out in the beautiful country where it doesn't take very much money to live, and we'll find a way to get by. She looked at me and she said, what's so wrong with that? And that's exactly the point. While you want your plans to happen, when you think about what's the worst thing that can happen to you and you plan for it, you'll find out that number one, perhaps it's not so terrible, and number two, when you plan for the worst thing that can happen, sometimes it opens up new opportunities for you. So as you plan your business, I want you to plan for the upside, but I also want you to take just a minute, say 2 minutes, and think about what's the worst that could happen and what would I do. If you do that, you'll be more conservative, you'll spend less, and more importantly, you'll not feel any stress because you'll know that if things go crazy, you know what you're doing next. This has been Rich with your 2-minute drill, and we'll see you next time.